And I think ultimately, if we can look at life more as a competition, right? For me, at least, this makes sense. Maybe you think this is crazy. Maybe this sounds ridiculous. I don't know. But for me, I'm a competitive person. And if you're a competitive person too, then I think this might resonate with you. If we can think about life as a competition of me versus me, you versus you, and ultimately every day we wake up, we're in competition with ourselves. We're in competition to get better, to learn, to grow, to evolve, to excel. Ultimately, that competition with a higher version of ourselves is going to pull us forward, is going to grow us, and is going to allow us to evolve and get to the next level.
I won't waste another minute, no, I won't. I'm a man on a mission. I'm a man on a mission. I don't need no permission. I'm a man on a mission.
Welcome to Entitled to Nothing, where we believe our life is our fault. My name is Mink, and I started this show because I've spent the last 20 years of my life running headfirst into failure after failure, and I've learned how to turn my failures into lessons, and I've used those lessons to create life on my terms. And what I want to do with this show is share everything I've learned on my journey to help inspire you on yours. So, a week I was at a business conference, and one of the speakers said, the greatest competition you have is with yourself. You are your greatest opponent. It's you versus you. And I want to talk about this with you guys today because I have spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I know I have been in competition with myself for a long time. And I think it's not always easy, but it's always necessary. You know, we're in competition with our fears and our doubts. We're in competition with what we believe is possible. We're in competition with the goals that we have for ourselves. And there is this natural tension that comes up in life, whether it's, we have the desire to lose weight and we're in competition with who we are today, being out of shape or overweight, and we're competing with who we want to be tomorrow, that lean, slim, in shape, sexy looking motherfucker. It's like there is this tension or this competition between who we are today and where we want to go. And oftentimes there's a competition between who we are today and who we've been in the past. And I think it's a really important principle for us to understand that who we compete with is going to be who we become. In sports, we understand that if we are going into competition to compete against someone else. And I know some people love competition and other people really hate competition. But I think who we compete with is ultimately maybe one of the most important decisions that we make. And I want to explain this to you guys too. I just want to think out loud with you today because ever since I heard this quote, I've been thinking about it. And it feels very, very true to me. And I think we can either compete with who we used to be or who we want to be. And the decision that we make on who we're going to compete with ultimately determines who we become. Because regardless of whether we like it or not, we're going to be competing with someone. We're going to, and the someone, again, it's who we were or who we want to be. And oftentimes, there's a quote from Mark Twain that I think it's from Mark Twain that I love. He says, you can never write the next chapter if you're constantly rereading the last one. And I think knowing that we are going to be in competition with ourselves, with our goals, with our ideas, with the things that we struggle with. We all have different vices, different challenges, different behaviors that we want to break or things that we want to stop doing or things that we want to start doing, right? Oftentimes, it's very easy to get discouraged when we're not making the progress that we want or when we feel like we're off base or we're losing. Candidly, guys, I've felt that way a lot recently. Here at Live Bearded, we've had to do some restructuring. And this is the first time in my career, well, not in my career, this is the first time in my leadership here at Live Bearded that we have had to let multiple people go at once. And we came to the conclusion a couple weeks ago that we had to let 4 people on our team go. And we needed to do that not because we weren't doing well, but because we had the wrong strategy. And ultimately, as the CEO and as the visionary, it's my responsibility to help guide and create the strategy of the company. And about a year ago, we sat down and I came up with a strategy with some of the people on my team. And I was like, okay, I think this is what we need to do. And fast forward 9 months, 12 months, that strategy didn't work out. And ultimately, in order to recreate a new strategy, to reallocate resources and move the company in a different direction, we had to let some people go. It was one of the most difficult days of my life as a leader, needing to tell 4 people that I really care about that I no longer had a position available for them, and to know that that was my fault largely, that I had created the wrong strategic approach. A very humbling process. It made me feel like a failure. It made me feel like I was losing. And I felt that way because I was in competition with who I thought I should be or where I thought I wanted to go. And I think when I hear this idea that you are your own greatest competition, it's you versus you, right? I think if we could all acknowledge that, that's going to be an incredible starting point. And this is really where it's my fault comes from, right? It's like I say our life is our fault because it's us versus us. We are in competition with ourselves, and ultimately who we're competing with and what we're working to create is going to determine the life that we have. And, I think we all intuitively have desires and things that we want to create in our life. And, using the simple analogy of fitness, right? It's like, if you want to get in better shape, every day you wake up, you're in competition with the food that you eat, with the exercise that you create, with the habits, with the stories, with the voice in your head that's like, you know what, man, you've done enough today. You can take the day off. Oh, you can indulge in that thing. You've been working really hard. There is this voice in our head all the time that is narrating our experience and telling us what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how we should show up, and ultimately what we deserve or don't deserve. And, one of my mentors, a guy that I really admire, is Andy Frisella. And on his podcast, he said we have a boss voice and we have a bitch voice, and they're constantly in competition of themselves. We have this bitch voice that's telling us that we can't do it, that we're not good enough. Who do you think you are? And then we have this boss voice that really is the one that believes we can do something great. We can create extraordinary results. We can lose the weight. We can, create the business or get the job. And the narration in our mind between the fears, the doubts, the limiting beliefs, and the ideas, the visions, and the things that inspire us, that competition is always going to exist. The competition between who we are today and who we want to be tomorrow. The challenge with this is some people are competing with who they used to be. They're competing with the previous version of themselves. They're competing, maybe a better way to say this is, right? I grew up playing basketball. Basketball was my first love. It was my escape. It was where I learned success and failure. And most importantly, it's where I learned hard work. And in sports, we kind of intuitively understand that if we compete against people that are not as good as us, then we're not going to get better. In fact, we might get worse because more often than not, we don't rise to the level of our potential. We fall to the level of our competition or who we're training with, right? So we have this paradigm where if you compete with people that are not as good as you, you're not going to get any better, and you might actually get worse. If you compete with people that are on the same level as you, right? You can push each other, you can challenge each other, and you can grow, but ultimately the growth is going to not be as strong because you're only going to grow to the level of which you're training. And if you're training with someone that's your equal, right, it's very hard for either of you to make big leaps. But if you're playing against people that are way better than you, if you're training against people that are better than you, The only way you can stay on the court is to elevate your game. And I remember this so vividly as a kid growing up and loving the game of basketball, right? Whenever I got to play on courts with people that are much better than me, it demanded that I raise my level of energy, capability, intelligence. I had to play harder. I had to, do everything I could to stay on the floor. And that was because I was competing with people that were better than me. And if I didn't step up, I was going to have to step off. And I think when it comes down to competition and competing with ourselves, right, we have to always compete with who we want to be and where we want to go, the type of business that we want, the type of relationship that we want, who we believe in, we're capable of becoming. There's always going to be competition between who we are and where we want to go, or who we've been and who we are. That competition between the boss and that bitch voice, that fear and that doubt. And I think ultimately, if we can look at life more as a competition, right? For me, at least, this makes sense. Maybe you think this is crazy. Maybe this sounds ridiculous. I don't know. But for me, I'm a competitive person. And if you're a competitive person too, then I think this might resonate with you. If we can think about life as a competition of me versus me, you versus you. And ultimately, every day we wake up, we're in competition with ourselves. We're in competition to get better, to learn, to grow, to evolve, to excel. Ultimately, that competition with a higher version of ourselves is going to pull us forward, is going to grow us, and is going to allow us to evolve and get to the next level. I know there's been many times in my life where I felt like a failure, and failing is part of the process of getting better, of learning and growing. I told you guys how I made a massive error in judgment, and I took the company in a slightly wrong direction, and it led to some stagnation, and it led to us not making the growth and the progress that I know we're capable of. And so I had to take a step back, and I had to humble myself and look in the mirror and say, okay, I failed here. I fucked this up. And now I have to dust myself off. I have to stand back up, and I have to move through this challenge. I have to have difficult conversations. I have to do some cleanup, and then I have to kind of reorient and say, okay, I went to competition with this strategy and it didn't work. And now I have to come back to kind of even and say, let's build another idea, another vision, and then I'm going to go into competition with that new vision, and I'm going to get to work on building that greater opportunity or that next opportunity. And along the way, we're going to fail. We're going to fall down. And we're going to feel like a failure at times. We're going to put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We're going to struggle. We're going to fight. And sometimes we're just going to need to take a step back and give ourselves a break. But ultimately, every day we wake up is a new day. It's a new opportunity to be in competition, to conspire to get better together. That's actually what the word competition means. In its Latin root form, it means to conspire together to make each other more. And I don't think there's anything better than that. I believe for me, happiness comes from creating progress in my life. I believe as humans, we are put on this earth to learn and to grow and to give our gifts and talents to the world. And the only way we can do that is if we sharpen those skills and those talents, if we are in competition with ourselves. And I think, so often we look at the external comparison or the external competition as who we're competing with. And maybe that is the case in some scenarios. Maybe external competition inspires us to work harder, to show up more, to do whatever it takes to get to the next level. But ultimately, every change is going to come down to an internal one. And I think that idea of you versus you, we are our own greatest competition. If we can really embody that, embrace that, and say, okay, every time I'm struggling, what am I competing with here? What part of me am I in competition with? Oh shit, it's that limiting belief. It's that fear. It's that doubt. Okay, yeah, I need to go to war with that doubt. I'll give you a real example of this that's taken place in my life. One of the things I really want to do is create a mentorship program for entrepreneurs. I love the game of business. I've been playing this game for 14 years now. I've made money, I've lost money, I've made money, I've lost money. I've now had the privilege to build an 8-figure company. We've done over $50 million in sales. And I want to share what I've learned on my journey with other entrepreneurs that are getting started. And I know that I have the capacity to do that. But there's this fear that I'm still not qualified. There's this fear that I'm still not good enough. There's this imposter syndrome, that bitch voice that says, who do you think you are? Like, yeah, you've had some success, but you're really a nobody in comparison to everyone else out there, the Bezoses and the Musks and, even the other entrepreneurs that that are far more successful than you. Like, why would anybody listen to you? And then I take a step back from that and I'm like, I'm in competition with this limitation. And the best thing I can do is battle that limitation until it doesn't exist anymore, until I can dominate it whenever it comes up. And then the most amazing thing is at the next new level of growth, we have new competitions, new fears, new doubts, new insecurities that we have to battle with. And oftentimes I think the reason why I love this idea, our greatest competition is ourself, is because it gives us permission to compete against the limitations, the fears, the doubts, and also the dreams, the goals, the ideals, right? If we're competing against the things that are holding us back, eventually we're going to dominate them. We're going to learn how to overcome them, and we're going to develop the skills and the character traits necessary to overcome them anytime they come up. And then if we compete with who we want to be, with the goals, the dreams, the aspirations that we have, now we're playing against that competitor that's better than us. And it's calling us to raise our game, to elevate, to improve, to grow. And I believe that is what we're put on this earth to do. I think that God gave us gifts, and the thing that we must do is to maximize those gifts and then to give them back to the world. And the only way that's possible is if we are in deliberate and intentional competition with ourselves. So the reason why I love this idea that we are our biggest opponent is because I believe that life is a game. And in order to win at the game of life, we're going to have external competitors and we're going to have internal competitors. And ultimately, it's the internal competition that we have that's going to determine our capacity to compete externally in the world. We have to play the game. And whether we show up and compete or maybe a better way to say this is like, you can sit in the bleachers of life and watch the competition, watch the people that have the courage to go to war with their fears, their doubts, to battle against their dreams and their ideals. You can watch it or you can play the game. And if we're in competition with ourselves, we're in the game, right? You can surrender to your fears and doubts, and you can surrender the goals that you have, or you can be in competition with them. And by being in competition with them, you are striving to overcome them and to create them. And I just know in my life that when I have realized there was a part of me that was holding me back and I went into competition with that part and I overcame it, it unlocked the next level of growth for me. And it allowed me to become what I am today. I think competition ultimately inspires us to get better. And as you're listening to this, if there is an area of your life that you are avoiding, if there is something that you know you need to do, but you've been intentionally avoiding it, I would challenge you to go into competition with that thing. If there's a conversation you need to have, be in competition with that conversation and go have it, go do it so that you win that competition, so that you build that muscle. If there is a habit that you know you need to break, maybe you've been drinking too much or partying too much or not showing up in the way that you want to show up, go into competition with that habit, with that failure of character or belief. And by going into competition with it, you give yourself the opportunity to overcome it. I think by reframing the game as a competition, right, it gives us permission to play. So rather than me being not good enough to start that coaching program, now I'm just in competition to become great so that I can do it, to overcome and endure. And it becomes a game that we play with ourselves. And I think if we can willingly accept the competition between who we are and where we want to go, and we can compete with the limitations that we feel today so we can achieve the opportunity that we know is possible, we're creating the character to build anything. And our success in life ultimately comes down to three things: the skills that we have, the character traits that we possess, and the beliefs that we have about what's possible for ourselves. And if one of the beliefs you have is, I'm always going to be in the game, and that means I'm always going to be competing with myself, you're guaranteed to win. Because the point of competition is to continue to play the game. So in closing, I would say get off the bleachers and get into the game of life. Face the challenges, the fears, the doubts. Believe in the goals and the aspirations and the visions, and be in competition with them because they conspire together to make you better. I appreciate you guys listening to this one today. This is just a candid conversation. I'm just thinking out loud with you guys today. And if you've made it this far, I truly appreciate you sticking with me. I believe the greatest gift we have is the gift of each other. And my goal with this podcast is to simply share the thoughts, the experiences, the stories, and the lessons that I've learned on my journey in the hopes that they can help inspire you to create the life that you want and to live life on your terms. I think that's our goal. I think that is what we all want. At the end of the day, we want to live life on our terms. That's my prayer for you. It's my prayer for me. Hope you have an amazing week, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.